Good evening and welcome to Pop-Up University at Langlab. I'm Elizabeth Benyon, Chancellor's Professor of Political Science and Director of Community Engagement at Indiana University South Bend. We are delighted you are here. You'll notice sign-in sheets at your table. We would love to be able to let you know about future pop-up events. I see some new faces here, so please let us know that you're here. There's also a survey that you can use before you leave tonight to give us your feedback. You will see a little poster for Civic Leadership Academy. The Office of Community Engagement partners with the American Democracy Project on that event, and you can see the upcoming events, including how national and state policymaking work and how local policymaking works. And you are invited to come, bring your neighbors, bring your friends. That is free and open to the public. You don't need to RSVP. You can just sign in when you show up at that. And folks who attend at least 3 of those 4 will have a participation certificate for Civic Leadership Academy. So we welcome you to the IU South Bend campus for that event, that series of events. Tonight, I'm absolutely delighted to be here to have a one-of-a-kind, unique experience. It's unlike anything we've ever done at Pop-Up before. We are actually going to hear a new symphony by Jorge Muñiz, and we are going to hear a professional recording. It's going to be interspersed by the poems, readings of poems that inspired each movement of this piece, as well as a discussion about chapters in a papal encyclical by St. Francis about the dignity of humans, the dignity of man, and the solidarity that we share with the planet, with each other here on Earth. And so we're going to be able to hear the text that actually inspired the composer. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with some background by Jorge Muñiz, the composer. He's going to talk a little bit about the work as a whole. Then we will listen to Dark Clouds Over a Closed World, Movement 1. And moving into that, we'll hear the poem Caged Bird, Why the Caged Bird Sings by Maya Angelou, read by Lori Kasky-Sigety. We'll hear about the encyclical chapter, Dark Clouds Over a Closed World, by moral theology professor David Cloutier. And we will reflect on those themes: isolation, injustice, longing for freedom. Then we'll hear movement 2, and the lead into that will be the poem, the last quatrain of the Ballad of Emmett Till by Gwendolyn Brooks, read by Howard Dukes. We'll hear about A Stranger on the Road, another chapter in the encyclical, and think about additional themes: tragedy, moral awakening, solidarity. Movement 3 will be An Open Heart for an Open World, and we'll lead into that with Let America Be America Again, a poem by Langston Hughes, read by Howard Dukes. And then we'll hear a little bit about the encyclical chapters, A Heart Open to the World, and Envisaging and Engendering an Open World. And so I want to tell you a little bit, and as we think about hope and inclusion and ideals and how we can live together. We'll have a time for sharing of your written reflections, what you'd like to share, as well as your questions for the composer at the conclusion of the evening after we've listened to the entire composition. And so you have notepads or note sheets on your tables too, where you can write down what comes to mind after hearing the poem, thinking about the themes, and as you're listening to the music, what does it make you think of? And perhaps you'll want to share with others. So that is the plan for today. I want to briefly tell you about the speakers this evening. I'll start with composer and professor, Dr. Jorge Muñiz. Now, you'll have to go to his website to read the full biography and all of the things that he's produced. He's a very prolific composer. So this is an abridged version that I'm providing you with this evening. He holds degrees from Carnegie Mellon University and the Manhattan School of Music and serves as Chancellor's Professor of Music at Indiana University South Bend. This is the rank distinction above the rank of full professor. Jorge is an acclaimed composer whose music has been performed across Europe, Asia, Australia, and the US by ensembles including, but not limited to, the Strasbourg Philharmonic, Seville Symphony, Oviedo Philharmonica, South Bend Symphony, Euclid Quartet, and Duo Sonidos. His major works include Requiem for the Innocent from 2010, which was praised as a magnificent oratorio by the South Bend Tribune, and Fuente Ovejuna, a 3-act opera commissioned by Opera Oviedo and later staged by Opera de Tenerife. Recent highlights include the premiere of Motown Dreams in 2022 by saxophonist Timothy McAllister and Solidarity Symphony in 2025 with the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra, which we will hear this evening. His recordings feature collaborations with guitarist Adam Levin, Portraits from the Heartland, and violinist Lucia Ventimiglia, Salve Regina, and there are many, many more. So only in the interest of time, I'll just give you a taste of his work. Our other speaker today is David Cloutier. He is a professor of moral theology with concurrent appointment in business, ethics, and society program in the Mendoza College of Business at the University of Notre Dame. He is the author of a number of books, including award-winning The Vice of Luxury, Economic Excess in a Consumer Age, and Walking God's Earth, The Environment in Catholic Theology. He has written for Commonweal America and writes quarterly columns on Catholic social ethics and everyday life for U.S. Catholics, and his current writing projects aim at articulating a more fully Catholic social imaginary for contemporary society beyond partisan divisions. Our poetry readers this evening, let me briefly introduce them. Howard Dukes is a distinguished alumnus of Indiana University South Bend. In fact, several of you in the room were there at the Night of the Titans, where he was honored as the 2025 Alumni of the Year and as the university at this recent celebration. Originally from Gary, Indiana, he earned his BA in 1991 and MLS in 2015, and that MLS was from IU South Bend. He built a respected career as a reporter for the South Bend Tribune and has been a passionate advocate for the arts and community engagement. His commitment to service and storytelling reflects a lifelong dedication to uplifting others, a value instilled by his family and embraced through his personal and professional journey. And finally, Lori Kasky-Sigety is a multidisciplinary artist, educator, and writer based in South Bend, Indiana. She serves as an adjunct professor at IU South Bend and previously worked in public libraries for over 2 decades. Her creative work spans poetry, music, visual art, and game writing, often exploring themes of history, feminism, and neurodiversity. She co-authored The Medieval Vagina, a historical and feminist exploration of women's experiences in the Middle Ages, and regularly contributes to platforms like Gnome Stew on role-playing and storytelling. She regularly performs original poetry at the Poetry Den at the Civil Rights Heritage Center, which is a part of IU South Bend. And she blends historical insights with humor and feminist commentary. This show was staged actually at the Players Ensemble. Some of us were able to see that at the local theater group here in South Bend, Indiana. So those will be our speakers today. And I'm going to start with Dr. Muniz, who will give us this sense of his thoughts, his process, the motivation behind composing the music that we are fortunate enough to be able to hear this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here and to share my work. This is a very personal work to me. For a long time, I see myself and I see the role of a composer as like an artist, an agent, hopefully for change, for a conversation, for a discussion, to have our art opening these conversations. For me, is a dear work for me to have written this particular piece because it touches on a particular subject that I think is so present. It was present maybe 1,000 years ago, but it's very present today as well, which is human dignity. and how we treat others, those that we love, but also especially those that we don't love. As I was thinking about that, this is one of those projects that has stayed with me for many years, and is kind of waiting for the right time when it can happen. And for me, it was the opportunity that I received with a commission from Classical Music Indie. About 2.5 years ago, they came to me and they commissioned me, and they wanted for me to write a new work for orchestra. But it's one of those great commissions for composers because they don't tell you exactly what to do. So I get to actually think about what can I do about this. So here I was with that project, that offer, and this topic came really to the foreground. And so I started thinking about that. And I have written other works in the past that were also designed for this conversation. So, the opera I mentioned before, Fuentevejuna, is one of those cases. Fuentevejuna is a very dear story for Spaniards and Spanish speakers all around the world because it's one of those major works of the literature in the Spanish language. But to me, most important is that is a topic that it was very much present today, is the topic of abuse, how people deal with others who exert a power that is unlimited, unfettered, and there is no way to stop them unless we ask for justice and we actually speak up. And that's what Fuentevejuna is about. Well, that premiere of the opera was actually led by lots of conversations in the city and around, the cities, on the aspects of abuse. For example, there were like fundraisers for the Red Cross for funds to help women that have been abused. So a lot of way of conversation, but also of directly helping people. That's what I think art can do. So for me, when I started thinking about human dignity, I wanted to find something that would be really close to my heart. In many ways, I needed several things. I needed structure for the work, I needed emotion, and I needed direct connection with me. Someone that has been living here in South Bend for 20 years, very much connected to Indiana. So I started planning about this work. I wanted it to be a symphony because this work has a symphonic quality in the sense, not just the sense for a symphony orchestra, but that all the instruments speak with their own voice. And you're going to hear in this piece, particularly the cello, which is the instrument that starts at the beginning in the first movement, speaking with a very emotional speech, and it gets totally clever by the orchestra, kind of covering it all the time. So there's all these different characters that you're going to hear. Particularly, you will see that the instrument of the piano, the symphony is scored for strings, piano, and percussion. So the piano, through the three movements that the piece is scored for, is going to have more and more importance. And that is that voice that is yearning for us to speak up, to be heard, to be understood. So by the third movement, you're going to see a very triumphant voice at the end that comes through that piano. But the piece, although is a symphony, is also in some ways a song without words. There are no words spoken directly with the music, but there is a lot of emotion that comes out of words. So for me, it was very important that I brought poetry into the piece. Now, the piece is not designed to be recited, the poetry through the music, but I did thought that we should hear this poetry, read the poetry, hear the poetry, and then hear the music. And the fulfillment of that is actually tonight, because I get to actually see the third part of this piece, which is the conversation. See what the music kind of inspires you to think about, to converse with your friends on the table, and spark maybe further conversations. I will tell you a personal experience. When the Requiem for the Innocent was premiered in 2010 with the South Bend Symphony, this is a work about honoring not just the victims of terrorism around the world, but those of us left behind, particularly thinking of 9/11, because for me, I was in New York in those days, and it's something that I carry all that time. But for me, I will tell you, I love the performance. I love what it was that week of rehearsals, but getting letters from people in the months after, telling them how much it helped them reflect about the issues of hope, of love, of remembrance. That to me was the most fulfilling. So I hope that this experience tonight will also leave you with some reflection as well. So that's my hope for this piece. In addition to that, let me just tell you a little bit. I mentioned about how it's almost like a song without words, it's emotions, but there are no text through the piece. Well, in order to devise that, I found 3 poems that to me were bringing the exact emotion I wanted for the piece. So that's the emotional part. The structural part, the third part I was mentioning before, is what came really the sustenance for the whole piece, which is the encyclical by Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti. Fratelli Tutti directly speaks about human dignity, but it does it in a way that I think is extremely courageous, is very strong, very, very dark in the first chapter particularly, but it's also leaving a lot of room for hope. So the first movement, and I will read you a little bit from the program notes just to give you a sense of what these movements are, then they will pair with the poetry you're going to hear and the music. So Dark Clouds Over a Closed World is a commentary on our current times and our problems and challenges in our society, such as the loss of a sense of human dignity, the culture of waste, the erosion of democracy, the spread of individualism and indifference, the violence of war and terrorism, the manipulation of information, and in those times, especially the crisis of the pandemic as well. This darkness that we are experiencing today in many different ways are reflected also in the poem Cage Bird by Maya Angelou that you're going to hear in a moment. The progression in this first movement moves us from a resentment, despair, and suffering that you hear in that voice of the cage bird, which is represented by the cello, and how the orchestra keeps oppressing it, pushing it down, and the cello keeps trying to reach out. In the intent to become a free bird, a call for universal fraternity, even if at this very moment it seems almost impossible. That's kind of our beginning of this kind of opera without words. It starts there, it starts very dark, you'll see. But through that first movement, it comes to a second movement. The second movement is called The Stranger on the Road. It mimics the title of the second chapter of the encyclical. And it's a reflection on the image of the Good Samaritan. What do we do? How do we react to those people? Again, not the people that we love the most, but the people that we maybe think that they are not worthy of our attention, or we think that we prefer to be far from them. So how I could have done a different approach to a piece like this regarding the topic of the Good Samaritan. What I chose was actually a poem called The Last Quatrain of the Ballad of Emmett Till by Gwendolyn Brooks. This is a very short poem. It's so full of emotions, so raw in many ways, just 4 verses. But for me, I saw the mother of Emmett Till as that Good Samaritan because she spoke up in the most clear way to everybody by asking for that open casket of her son so people could see what happened. So that's, for me, that representation of the Good Samaritan. So a mother that has lost a child, I think is going to go through different moments of rage and then tamper down and rage again and tamper down in some ways. And always like the bird in the first movement, coming, bubbling up. So that's what you're going to hear in this second movement. These raw emotions coming with the orchestra, an impetus of rage that you'll hear with the strings particularly. Now, on the other hand, the piece, the second movement, ends with almost like a lullaby that you'll hear by a quartet, a small subset for the string orchestra, where in some ways we also see another side of that Good Samaritan, which is a side of compassion and kindness and solidarity that is essential foundation to build a better and more just world. Finally, the third movement, An Open Heart, for an open world actually combines the third and fourth chapter of the encyclical. And this is the kind of journey of the piece. We went from the first to the second movement into a movement that starts bubbling up a sense of hope. How can we move forward? That's what Pope Francis also talks about. How can we move forward in this world after what we are seeing, right? So this concludes the journey of this symphony. The driving rhythmic force of the movement, inspired by the emotional message of Let America Be America Again by Langston Hughes, presents this inextinguishable voice that advocates for a culture of encounter, respect, and mutual enrichment in order to change the hearts of those filled with tendencies towards nationalism, racism, xenophobia, populism. The bright conclusion of the symphony, you see a really different tone at the end of the work, I think, especially when you compare it to the beginning. This bright conclusion of the symphony is a call for a better kind of politics that is oriented to the common good and to the inclusive development of all people. So with that, I'll be happy to answer questions at the end, but I hope you enjoy this performance tonight. It was recorded on February 1st by the Indianapolis Chamber Orchestra. And with that, we'll continue now with the reading of the poetry and the reflections by my colleague here, my esteemed colleague. Thank you.
Caged Bird by Maya Angelou. A free bird leaps on the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wing in the orange sun rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that stalks down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown, but long for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill. For the caged bird sings of freedom. The free bird thinks of another breeze, and the trade winds soft through the sighing trees, and the fat worms waiting on a dawn-bright lawn as he names the sky his own. But a caged bird stands on the grave of dreams. His shadow shouts on the nightmare's scream. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. The caged bird sings with a fearful trill of things unknown but long for still, and his tune is heard on the distant hill, for the caged bird sings of freedom.
In writing these reflections on the movements of the symphony, I've begun each reflection with a contemplation of an image, then used some words of Francis himself, and then closed with a question. So for movement one, let us contemplate fear and hostility. We remember the age of the pandemic when every day could be dominated by these emotions: fear of what might happen, hostility towards others who seemed not to care. So much closed, some things have never reopened. In the last decade, we have seen many social bonds frayed, family members divided, communities in conflict, fear and hatred expressed in brash, ultimately destructive ways. Division begets division. Opposition to one set of forces emboldens hostility further. In every country, leaders feed the hostility of their followers to others, presenting the other as a constant threat, requiring vigilance and opposition. Every side features voices that reinforce fear and hostility. Humanity is divided. We live in fear of the enemy, at the mercy of the diabolical, the diabolos, the one who divides. In opening his letter, Francis notes signs of a certain regression in our 21st century. He is not naive about the 20th. However, he does say that in that prior age, many signs of human unity emerged over against forces that sought to divide and conquer. More societies became more and more responsive to the human rights of all. The world increasingly cooperated, both economically and politically. With all its limitations, Francis says we could look at the world of the late 20th century and imagine a more unified, less conflictual world. No more. Wars are back. Dictators are back. Trade conflict is back. In the midst of the first year of the pandemic, Francis takes a broader view. Why has all this happened? He asks us to reflect initially on three things. First, he says that we have forgotten history, deconstructed it so that it can mean anything we want. We have failed to tell a certain kind of story about how the world is supposed to be, how our history should move towards a world made better. Second, we have created a throwaway world in which some parts of our human family, Francis says, can be readily sacrificed for the sake of others considered worthy of a carefree existence. Third, we have created a digital world, which the Pope says individuals maintain their comfortable consumerist isolation, but then choose a form of constant but febrile bonding that encourages remarkable hostility, insults, abuse, defamation, and verbal violence with a lack of restraint that could not exist in physical contact without tearing us all apart. Even at Notre Dame, students use an app called Fizz that is intentionally marketed by paid student ambassadors for posting anonymized comments about whatever or whomever they want. And we accept all this division and even let people profit from it. Amidst this fear and hostility, Francis sums up by saying, the sense of belonging to a single human family is fading, replaced by a cool, comfortable, and globalized indifference, born of deep disillusionment, concealed behind a deceptive illusion, thinking that we are all powerful and can isolate and sustain ourselves while everything else falls apart. The first chapter asks, will we care?
the last quatrain of the ballad of Emmett Till. After the murder, after the burial. Emmett Till's mother is a pretty-faced thing. The tent of pulled taffy. She sits in a red room, drinking black coffee. She kisses her killed boy, and she is sorry. Chaos in windy graves through a red prairie. The last quatrain of the ballad of Emmett Till.
Let us contemplate the broken and beaten person left by the side of a treacherous road. It is a story so well known in our culture that we have Good Samaritan laws. It is a story so obvious in its moral power that no one would question it as the essence of Jesus' moral message. And yet, it is a story so difficult to put into practice. For who among us takes regular risks to approach the suffering stranger? After all, there are so many reasons not to approach. We have something else we must get to. We don't know anything about their condition. We suspect they might resist help. We worry they may ask us for too much or even take something from us. We even might believe, at times not wrongly, that a trap is being set for us. But suffering strangers, Francis says, are something like the moral litmus test for us individually, for our society, and for the world. Loving the neighbor in this story is not a generic claim to just love everyone. It is a specific claim. Love the neighbor who is visibly in need of this love. This is the moral litmus test. It is a test we may pass in some circumstances. In our families, parents may rush to help the child who is hurt and struggling. In our classrooms, teachers may take the extra time to work with or mentor a student who is struggling. The manager of a team or a workplace may take someone aside and provide support or special attention if they seem a little off. But do we do this more broadly? Do we do it as a society? Francis presents a very sharp statement about this. He defines an unhealthy society as a society that seeks prosperity but turns its back on suffering. Thus, the story of the Good Samaritan presents what he calls the basic decision we need to make in order to rebuild our wounded world. The choice is presented by the characters of the story. Will we be the robbers who cause the damage to the man? Will we be the ones who pass by on the other side, averting our eyes and minding our own business? Or will we be the Samaritans who identify with the vulnerability of others and lift up and rehabilitate the fallen for the common good? Francis asks, will we bend down to touch and heal the wounds of others? And so the second chapter asks, will we bend down?
Let America be America again by Langston Hughes. Let America be America again. Let it be the dream it used to be. Let it be the pioneer on the plain, seeking a home where he himself is free. America never was America to me. Let America be the dreamer's dream. Let it be that great, strong land of love where never kings connive nor tyrants scheme, that any man be crushed by one above. It never was America to me. Oh, let my land be a land where liberty is crowned with no false patriotic wreath, but opportunity is real and life is free. Equality is in the air we breathe. There's never been equality for me, nor freedom in this homeland of the free. Say, who are you that mumbles in the dark? And who are you that draws your veil across the stars? I am the poor white fool that pushed apart. I am the Negro bearing slavery scars. I am the red man driven from the land. I am the immigrant clutching the hope I seek and finding only the same old stupid plan of dog eat dog, mighty crush the weak. I am the young man full of strength and hope, tangled in that ancient endless chain of profit, power, gain, of grab the land, of grab the gold, of grab the ways of satisfying need, of work the men, of take the pay, of owning everything for one's own greed. I am the farmer, bondsman to the soil. I am the worker, sold to the machine. I am the Negro, servant to you all. I am the people, humble, hungry, mean. Hungry yet today, despite the dream, beaten yet today, old pioneers. I am the man who never got ahead, the poorest worker bartered through the years. Yet, I am the one who dreamt our basic dream in the old world, while still a serf of kings, who dreamt a dream so strong, so brave, so true, that yet even its mighty daring sings in every brick and stone, in every furrow turn, that's made America the land it has become. Oh, I'm the man who sailed those early seas in search of what I meant to be my home. For I'm the one who left dark Ireland's shore and Poland's plain and England's grassy lake, and torn from Black Africa's strand I came to build homeland of the free. The free? Who said the free? Not me. Surely not me. The millions on relief today, the millions shot down when we strike, the millions who had nothing for our pay, for all the dreams we dreamed, and all the songs we sung, and all the hopes we held, and all the flags we hung, the millions who had nothing for our pay, except the dream that's almost dead today. Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, and yet must be, the land where every man is free, the land that's mine, the poor man's, the Indians, Negroes, me, who made America, whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must bring back our mighty dream again. Sure, call me any other name you choose. The steel of freedom does not stain from those who live like leeches on the people's lives. We must take back our land again, America. Oh yes, I say it plain. America was never America to me. And yet I swear this oath, America will be. Out of the wreck and the ruin of our gangster death, the rape and rot of graft and stealth and lies, we, the people, must redeem the land, the mines, the plants, the rivers, the mountains, and the endless plain, and all the stretch of these great green states, and make America again. Thank you.
Let us contemplate the gift, not a prescribed consumer ritual gift, selected among many choices with some anxiety over whether it is the right thing. No, let us contemplate how we have received things from others far beyond what we might have earned or deserved. Imagine gifts descending from parents, from workers, from social ancestors, from religious traditions. Imagine the gifts of our cities, our parks, our schools. Imagine the superabundance of nature, vast forests, so many species, and a sky with countless stars. Imagine the very special gifts we have received at times in our lives when someone gave us a break. Someone bent down to help us when we fell. Someone offered a piece of wisdom that has never ceased to echo in our minds. Then imagine that God has created a universe and a creature where all this is natural. It is the way it is supposed to be. Francis writes, human beings are so made that they cannot live, develop, and find fulfillment except in the sincere gift of self to others. This is the ultimate image of God in us, the image of loving relationship, not of overwhelming power or all-knowing intellect. Gift is life. Gift is what it means to live. Francis further says, there is no life when we claim to be self-sufficient and live as islands. In these attitudes, he says, death prevails. And so, the third chapter asks, will we receive all these gifts?
How wonderful. I am just amazed by how much emotion and the stories that we heard and the poems, how you heard them reflected in the music. We actually do have some time for you all to share any reflections that you have and also any questions that you might have for the composer. So if you have something that you would like to share, please do let me, or to raise your hand and we'll get your questions or comments. I also just want to point out if there are any students here for honors, make sure you see Anna or for Thrive and Earn in the back there before you leave to make sure that you have your full instructions. What do you all think? Any thoughts, comments, questions that you want to share? Yes.
Okay, a couple of questions really about the orchestra. One, I thought as a bassist, I loved your use of low strings. So the questions, how many basses were in this orchestra? You know?
Yeah, so this actually is, it was about 35 players in the string orchestra, plus the percussion and the piano. Probably about 2 basses, I think. 2, 3 basses. I can't recall now, but I think 2, 3, yeah.
But
Not very
was it
large.
written as 2 bass lines?
So
parts?
there are divisions, there are separation in 2. So yeah.
The first movement in particular was like, I don't know if it was your intent, but it listened as this really fine counterpoint
Yes.
among the low strings.
Very much.
And just, such a, is that 2 basses and
Yeah.
3 cello parts?
Yeah,
And
it's very weak at first. So the sound is like is purposely very thin, and they're supposed to be start with just a quartet, and then the basses add,
Right.
and it's just little by little grows, but it's supposed to be thin and frail.
Well, thank you. I found that really beautiful.
Thank
like
you.
I said, as an electric bass guitarist, I thought, wow, that's like excellent use of,
Thank you, sir.
stringed instrument in the low range. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Did you have any? First of all, I loved it. It was amazing. And second of all, did you have any instruments that were like the protagonists and some of the antagonists? Do you have anything like that?
Yes, very much. I thought of the piece as individuals versus the group. So what you hear a lot is individual instruments like the cello or the piano. The quartet also has its own character as well that comes through in different places versus the whole group. So that's where the thickness of the group versus the thinness of the individuals. So yeah, very much like that, and it morphs in different instruments. So it's not one single instrument, but that voice of the cage bird that is the cello at first eventually becomes the piano. It's a transformation through the symphony that you see, but it's a continuity with these solo instruments. Yeah. Thank you. Ah. Well, that's an interesting question. So I don't have a particular film composer, particularly that's a direct influence. To me, especially as somebody that was born in a different country and I came here later, and I became an American also later time in my life, I discovered the musics of this country, and I find the folklore, the voice of the people through those musics really enriching. So my music has kind of that tradition of European sounds. You might hear some composers like Ligeti, for example, or composers like Penderecki's, like thick and dark, but also you find some of the rhythms and elements. For example, there is some hip hop elements of rhythm. There is some bluegrass elements as well. I find that connects me. I was talking about the connection with my roots, with my place here. And this is one way I do it, is through the vernacular I bring. So that's what I would say probably are the biggest influences is like the voice of the people's music. Yeah.
Were there any particular composers who inspired you for this piece?
I wouldn't say a particular composer, but you probably, so here's the thing, maybe not a particular composer that I had directly in mind, but I think artists in general, I think we have all these subconscious kind of movement inside that sometimes we're not even conscious, and sometimes it just comes through because that's our background, that's where we grew up, right? I think in some ways I probably will mention Mahler because of his narrative, symphonic narrative. So it's something I didn't think when I was writing the piece, but as I reflect now and you're mentioning that, I think perhaps that's one of the biggest influences. If you're looking at the long composition, like 30-minute symphony, and that narrative of telling a story, Mahler was just amazing in that sense. So that's a teacher to learn from, definitely. Yes.
It's probably a silly question, but do you think of instruments in terms of like their histories, their cultural origins? Like how do you pick your instruments? Do you have like emotional attachment to certain instruments just because of your knowledge, or something? I imagine also it's like, well, we don't have anyone playing X instrument.
Right. Well, it's interesting. That's a very good question. Sometimes, when you are orchestrating, you're thinking about what is the best combination at that point. You kind of think technically, but there are definitely some sounds that I was looking. The voice of the cage bird is a human voice. For me, the cello, that's what it represents. There is a warmth in the cello that, particularly the higher register, that is so human, So I knew that I was going to start with the cello for sure, And then some other choices, I think, the solo violin that we hear sometimes, the high solo, like rising, that's very idiomatic to the instrument. So when you're thinking of a gesture, that's the instrument I want, just because of the idiom, So that's what I would say, yeah, definitely. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So as I was listening to the first movement with Dark Clouds Over a Closed World, that soulfulness of the cello, and you just mentioned starting the cello, really, really struck me in this sort of almost joy trying to break through, but then you hear so much dissonance, you have the glissandos and sliding, and just all that drama and passion, but also almost like, it seemed like thunder from the bass
Yes.
and the drums. And I believe you have a version for a quartet of this, and I'm just wondering how, as a composer, you can capture that same emotion that we thought about with the encyclical and heard in the poem when you have so many fewer instruments and you don't have the drum or don't have the bass, and how you go about creating those sort of smaller ensemble versions of a piece like this.
Yeah, true. And the truth is that you can't really do it. There is the instrument, the orchestra as an instrument is what it is. So I think you understand there is a different voice. So the piece changes. It's a different piece in some ways. I was very happy. They asked me to write a version for a string quartet. The reason is because I really wanted them to take the piece out to community centers. And you can't bring a whole orchestra with you, but you can bring a quartet. So I did that smaller version. So the quartet is a very intimate instrument, So I think the voice in the symphony, while it continues the message, is a much more personal. And I didn't get the chance, unfortunately, to go down for any quartet performances. So I actually haven't heard it with the quartet myself, but I hear it here. So it's it's a much more intimate sound. So everything is just a different level, you know. So you have to understand that that's what's going to be. You know, it would be different if I were, for example, if I were to orchestrate this for a full symphonic orchestra, full symphony orchestra with winds and brass. Again, the message will be also different as well. I'm not the message, sorry, but the color will be different. So you can still say the same words, but they may be amplified. You know, they have a little more dramatic range. The quartet is more constrained in that sense, but it's more individual. So that's how I think of it. It's almost like, in some ways, a different piece, in some ways. Yes.
Thank you very much, and thanks also for your words of introduction.
Thank you.
That helped prepare us, I think, for what we're going to hear. The first movement, especially with that kind of mournful single voice that's almost immediately overwhelmed by all these other voices and a kind of cacophony of sound. It reminded me a little bit of the opposite of Bartók's Symphony for Orchestra, where you have this tension going on between Shostakovich and Bartók, and beauty wins out.
Yes.
Over the banality of Shostakovich. Here it's the opposite.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great observation because it does have a little bit, there's another connection I didn't think about, but very true. The Concerto for Orchestra in Bartók is also these individuals kind of coming through. But it's a very interesting observation. Yes, thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Is that answering? I don't know if I think it's a good point. Yeah. I think in some ways I was aware that the voice would not fully win, you know, but I was hoping that it will come through, that it will have a chance to eventually come through. Yes, exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
How do you think it was like the development or like creation of the voice of the piano? Seems like the piano starts off as this like, it starts off like simple talking, and it involves like arguing, and then finally you get by the third one, it's like has more of a hopeful tone.
Yes.
How did you get that like development?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the piano, the instrument is an instrument that develops a lot in the piece through the three movements. You hear the main theme of the cello at the beginning, that bird theme, you know, throughout. But the piano kind of travels between the orchestra, the group, and the solo. So it sometimes is very much an orchestral instrument playing with the orchestra, but other times eventually it comes through as a soloist. It's almost like a concerto, a piano concerto. Not quite. And that was the idea, that I didn't want it to be a soloist per se, but it did have to rise up. So I don't know if that's answering your comment, but yeah, that was a difficult instrument because I didn't want it to start with it. I wanted to kind of start coming through little by little, and we don't hear it fully, really until the third movement. That's what really becomes more personal. So it's almost like a character in an opera that you see them develop and grow through the different acts. You know, they're different people by the end. You know, in some operas. So that's kind of how I saw it. Yeah. Mm. Yes, that's the idea. So that's what I think. To me, the idea of the piano really became fundamental at the end. It was kind of a first thought at first, and then it became. I started designing it as a character that takes over. Yeah. Mm. Oh yes.
Is it possible to buy the recording, and how will we know if any local groups are performing?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there are no plans right now, and the recording is complete, but we haven't worked yet about the publishing in a label, but hopefully we'll work towards that. Yeah, thank you.
And is there a way to find out if it does get scheduled?
Yeah, you. Oh, yeah.
If you sign in today, we will be sure to let everybody in our list know of any live performances or releases.
Thank you. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Good. Oh yes, please.
One final question about
Thank you.
the human voice.
Mm-hmm.
How, maybe for your readers, how they
I'm sorry, I could not hear well.
People who read,
Oh,
like working with the human voice, basically, and the text directions.
so,
In conjunction with your symphony.
I'm not sure if I'm so sorry.
No, yeah.
Oh, the poems. How did I choose those poems?
Yes, and how, like, I guess, how you chose to read them, how you chose to read them, like what they wanted to emphasize, or.
Oh, that's a very good question for them, perhaps also as well. Yeah. Mhm. Would you like to come?
Okay, sure. We just sit here, go up there, or?
Go out, go ahead, that's fine.
What now?
We can hear.
Yeah, I'm pretty soft-spoken actually, so, okay. It's a very good question. I actually have this book. I've been a Maya Angelou fan for a very, very long time. And when I was looking at it, I almost did like well up, honestly. I was kind of mad. And I'm like mad for this poor little bird that was like stuck in this cage. And I think probably like the human experience, like there's some times where we're like almost like put in a corner or put in a box or put in a cage, and just that feeling of being stuck and looking like, okay, what's it like to be free? And so, yeah, I kind of had a lot of feelings as I was reading it. I'm glad I didn't, like break down and like blubber up here. It's kind of awkward, but it's a very powerful poem, and it's very poignant to what's going on today.
As it relates to the Gwendolyn Brooks poem, I guess I just thought about every parent who has lost a child, because obviously that's not the natural order of things, and just trying to put myself in that situation, and just trying to everybody seeing the image of Emmett Till after he was pulled from the Tallahatchie River, and everybody seen the image of the funeral in Chicago, and so, but then that's the private moment of her, and I'm assuming that what she kissed was the photo of her son, and I could just, I just thought about that image and how many Black mothers have gone through that, over the years. As it relates to the Langston Hughes poem, I thought that poem was very timely. Let America be America again. I don't suspect that Donald Trump was reading Langston Hughes when he came up with his slogan, and I don't suspect that Donald Trump really knows what Langston Hughes is. But I think obviously their aspirations of what America is different. Langston Hughes is broad and inclusive, and our president is narrow and exclusive. And that struggle between those two visions of America, I think are, what I was trying to convey as I read it.
I know that one thing that Jorge wants to do with this Solidarity Symphony really is to have this be the beginning of a conversation about these kinds of topics of what is the future of this country and of this world, and how do we work together? And as we think about those themes that Pope Francis raises in the encyclical, those themes of human dignity and the place of human dignity in our world. It comes through so powerfully in the poems and also in the music. And so we hope that this can be the start of a continued conversation among us, but also more broadly in our community. And we hope that there will be additional times to play this music, perhaps live, and to have these conversations that we need to be having together as neighbors. And we are so very delighted that you joined us today. You have a final. Yes. Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, because obviously, Pope Leo has issued, I think, something along that line to what's going on.
Yes, just this past week.
What is, from the standpoint of somebody who studied that, what is the role of, what do the popes hope comes of those things when they do that? What's the purpose of it?
Well, the modern tradition of the Pope speaking on broad social issues dates back to Pope Leo XIII, often to his encyclical in 1891 on the workers. And it's not a coincidence historically that popes started speaking in this way when they had lost the papal states. That is, they no longer had any temporal territory to rule, but they recognized that there was a possibility to speak to the whole world in a unique way. And I think the uniqueness of the papal office has only increased in a divided world, because there are just very few figures who people can look to around the world, regardless of whether they believe the dogmas of the Catholic faith. Few leaders who represent something other than national self-interest or something other than a particular narrow line, but are trying to speak on behalf of humanity. So I think the popes are trying to speak on behalf, obviously, of Jesus Christ, but on behalf of humanity, on behalf of the dignity of every person made in the image of God.
Do you think he felt that because there is a interpretation of Christianity that, elevates a level of aggressiveness and chauvinism, that he needed to speak to show that that's not the way he sees it?
No, the Pope, I can say with great assurance that the current Holy Father is not an American Christian nationalist. Yes. He's a neighbor from Chicago, right? And he didn't grow up in a church as I didn't. I grew up in Chicago as well, that thought about Christian nationalism in the way that you're describing and in the way that is now visible in our country in disturbing ways.
So is he critiquing that?
Yes, Fratelli Tutti, the encyclical that inspired Jorge, has a whole chapter on nationalism and critiquing nationalism as contrary to this message of an open world and the gifts that we should be able to receive from everyone, not just from people who are like us.
So Pope Francis and Pope Leo both have certainly shared that message of not creating a nationalistic version of Christianity. And really, as David was saying, it is about humanity writ large, and whether or not somebody identifies as Catholic, to get these broad principles of human dignity that we can all embrace as human beings, or we hope that we can embrace. Thank you so much for being here. Let's have another round of applause for our readers, the professors, and the wonderful music.